Uh, Welcome to the Android Police Podcast. I'm your host tonight, Cody Toombs.
And I'm Ryan Hager.
And it's going to be just the two of us tonight. We're taking it easy. Everyone else is either out on vacation, sick, or busy with who knows what. But in the stead, we're here to take care of you. So we're starting off tonight with Oppo, who is kicking out the first attempt at an behind the screen, or rather, sorry, under the screen camera. And it looks very so-so. Very, very so-so.
Yeah, I mean it's a first effort. I remember the initial under-screen display fingerprint reader, which was also an Oppo or a Vivo device that was shown off at MWC. I want to say the year before last. There were some rough edges around that as well. I think it also had the first pop-out camera, right? So this is a first. You can definitely tell where on the display the camera is located, but it's a start. And considering how quickly we were able to move the ambient sensor and other light accepting devices under the display, I think that in a year or two we could have that cutout be hidden in such a way that it isn't noticeable, or it's effectively unnoticeable.
Yeah, I mean, just to look at it, this has two angles on it. One is how does the screen look where the camera cutout is, and then how the pictures look. As far as I'm concerned, like the camera cutout on the screen, really, honestly, at least in the picture, does not look that bad to me.
There's definitely a brightness difference. You can tell where it is.
Yeah, you can tell where it is. It almost looks kind of like a weak sunglasses kind of thing, like if you held sunglasses over the screen. So yeah, it's not perfect. It's not like it's truly hidden, but I wouldn't feel bad about having this on a phone.
I wouldn't either. If I were to object for some reason to having a pop-out mechanism, then like really hated the idea of hiding the camera and I wanted it visible or at least capable of being used at any time, something like this wouldn't bother me. But it is definitely not the all-screen thing. And if any irregularity in the panel bothers you when you're watching videos all zoomed in or whatever, it could drive you nuts.
Oh yeah. The other side of it though is the camera quality kind of not great. It so what they're doing is applying a little bit of like AI to try to clean up the image, but for the most part, their raw image is just it's hazier. It doesn't have the right white balance going on. There's a side by side showing basically what it looks like before and after their processing, and it's okay. It's really like better than front facing cameras from say 3-4 years ago, but I also wouldn't say that this is up to par with what you would expect from like any current front facing camera from a like decent flagship phone.
Yeah. I mean, but the importance of that depends on how much importance you place on the front-facing camera.
Yeah.
If, like me, you don't care if it's in a pop-out mechanism because you never use it, then it doesn't matter if it looks bad or it looks good.
Yeah, exactly. Selfie, like serious selfie people are gonna hate this. If all you care about is like sort of a face unlock feature, or you really just want front-facing camera for really basic use, this is fine. Considering what we're really talking about here is a piece of hardware that most people really honestly don't use. Well, I shouldn't say most people. I don't know the statistics, but I'm assuming a majority don't care too much about the front-facing camera. Yeah, I don't think this is a big loss to give up a little bit of quality on that, and still have a full screen, like basically a near bezel-less screen.
And the processing is okay. It is like it's over sharpened and a little weird, but it's fine. It's not.
Yeah.
All right. Not looking at the after picture, not the before. It's okay.
Right.
It's acceptable.
And I'm actually, I gotta say, for the processing it actually brought back a fair amount of like wispy strands of hair and stuff like that. Things that normally processing would have had more trouble with. So
that was the thing that I was impressed by the most. As you can see on the yellow on the sides, the contrast of her hair that's barely visible in the original photo, and it's very good.
Yeah. That being said, though, you can also look at the cloth for her top. You can actually tell it over brightened the white parts, and it actually lost
most of the texture.
Yeah, it looks like it lost all the texture. It's really tough to tell because these aren't super high res images, but actually they're really low res images. But it looks like that might have been a lightly ribbed cloth,
It was a knit,
and
yeah.
yeah, and you can't see any of it in the after picture. So, I mean, they're losing some detail, but it's not the worst.
Yeah, I would accept that trade-off.
Yeah. But overall, yeah, this is a good first start, but it's also very obviously a first start. Which, hey, like you said, in a year, maybe 2 years, I could see this being like a standard. I kind of want this to be a standard. I wanted this to be a standard ever since we were looking at cutouts in the screen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think it's too far off. Look at how quickly Vivo iterated from the world's first pop-out camera to, look, you can go buy a phone that's got it. So
Oh
I don't
yeah,
think it'll be
totally.
long.
So yeah, anyway, that's possibly a thing. And also a thing is if you're listening to us right now, we'd like to sorry, I am starting this off terribly. Let me restart. If you enjoyed the show and want to support us, we would love it if you would consider subscribing to us on twitch.tv/AndroidPolice. Amazon Prime members can connect a Twitch account to their Amazon account and get one free sub each month. That means you can give us money without actually paying anything. When you subscribe to us, you get to use a special emoji in the chat starring Ryan himself. And you get extra entry methods and our site's giveaways. You can find the instructions for linking accounts below the stream on the channel page, or if you're listening on the audio version, you can check the episode description. And keep in mind, keep in mind the Prime subscriptions have to be renewed manually each month. If you're not sure if you're still subscribed, just check the site, twitch.tv/AndroidPolice, and you can see right there, it'll say subscribe if you're not still subscribed. And moving on. Sorry, I'm doing like three things at once, so everything's.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of, I totally forgot to paste the link to that. All right. So moving on to the next topic. Google has given up on tablets. I'm just gonna say, shocker. Totally surprised. Didn't see it coming. But no, for anyone that hasn't already heard, Google has actually confirmed they're going to stop producing tablets. This doesn't mean that they're going to stop supporting tablets with Chrome OS or Android, though, to be fair, Android support of tablets has basically been dead for a little while anyway. But yeah, they're not going to produce their own physical tablets anymore. Other partners may continue, but this is pretty much the end of the road for Google doing it. And as we all know, or at least it's kind of believed, they don't really seem to put a lot of effort into software support for things that they don't put out in hardware.
I think that this could end up being an exception just because they still have hardware partners that are making tablets. So Chrome OS tablets are going to be a thing going forward from, I believe, HP and Asus were specifically called out and said that they're going to keep making them. They're going to keep being supported. And secondarily, Google's still been investing in this heavily touch optimized interface, not just because of tablets, but because all of the Chromebooks that we're seeing come out now have touch screens as well. So the same interface applies to both form factors as far as Google's concerned. So I wouldn't be too worried about Chrome OS tablets losing any software features or software support going forward. They'll keep getting updates for the remainder of their schedule, and the features that they have will be maintained. I think that's not a concern.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So I'm not trying to come down too hard on them. I don't think that they're going to be abandoning tablet support in any way, shape, and form, especially since, unlike Android, Google is in full control of Chrome OS. So partners aren't going to be, of course, my phone wakes up to that. Partners are not going to be able to really continue and really fully customize development on their own. They're fully beholden to Google for this, but I still think the effort from Google is going to feel at least a little half-hearted after this.
Maybe that could be true. We'll have to see. It'll take some time for it to figure out. I think that in general, it's sort of a half measure. I understand that the Pixel Slate didn't sell well, and I think that killing first-party Chrome tablets was probably a good idea, just because the experience isn't there, and the amount of time it would take to bring the touch-first experience to Chrome OS to the level of quality that people expect from a tablet, if they're comparing it in their minds to Apple, it's not going to happen. Definitely for years, probably ever. But my issue is that even though they've canceled the tablets, they're not scaling back their plans for this touch-first design, and there have been a couple of problems. The new, you know how I feel about virtual desktops. You know, I have an unhealthy addiction to way too many windows and way too many tabs. I just can't give them up.
Oh no, I'm with you on that. Just I tend to do everything in one window and either minimize stuff away or, I do keep at least one virtual window. I just don't use it a lot.
Oh, I got like 4 or 5, and I'm swiping between them constantly. And as an aside, I think that although I don't like most of the software experience, I think the very best virtual desktop experience of any platform is Apple's on Mac OS. It's so good. But so the issue I have is that virtual desks on Chrome OS, there's a gesture to be able to move windows between desktops. It's very early days. I mean, they only just implemented it. You can only play with it in Dev Channel. But as it stands, it already interferes. There's a direct conflict between the gesture required to move windows to a new desktop and the gesture in the multitasking view to kill them. So you go to drag one away and you end up accidentally closing a window. And it doesn't quite make sense. So they need to, it's kind of schizophrenic is the way I would describe it. They're trying to do two different things via the same mechanism. It doesn't quite work. Sort of like how we used to have the slide out edge gesture and the slide out for navigate back. And that's kind of unfortunately coming back, and you never quite know what's going to happen. So they need to refocus in terms of how they want people to interact with Chrome OS, in my opinion. And I think abandoning most of the touch first design would be best in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with that for even a second. It fits so well with almost everything I've even heard about Chrome OS development at this point. Like, they're doing some good things, but man, it's like they're getting held up and hung up on a lot of different issues.
It feels like some project managers just obsessed with, we need to have touch first. We need to have touch designs, and everything's got to be touch optimized. It's like, no, dude. Well, this is a desktop operating system, and it works really well as one. It's a great experience. Don't kill it.
Yeah, and actually, everything I've heard, it sounds not just like that. Not just that there is a project manager like that, but maybe there are too many project managers trying to pull different directions. It definitely has that feeling of left hand, right hand, not knowing what each other are doing. So I don't know. It schizophrenic. You said it perfectly. It just has that feel to it. So since we were just talking about Chrome OS, I'm going to totally move our topic list around just slightly. Chrome OS 75 just was announced with improvements for Linux apps. Which very specifically, it finally adds USB support. So Linux apps inside of Linux containers can now actually work with devices that you have attached, which, I mean, I'm not a Chrome OS user. I am stumbling over every word tonight. But that's all. That sounds like a pretty important thing to me. I guess, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but they still don't have the audio stuff worked out for Linux apps, right?
I don't remember. I can't remember the last time I listened to audio in a Linux application on Chrome. They may not. I think we're still waiting on graphics acceleration as well. That might have been added in 74. I don't remember.
All right. Well, either way, at the very least, this might still, like, this could bring a lot of functionality that wasn't there before, like connecting cameras and being able to use Linux apps that interact directly with a camera. Same with webcams, any audio gear. I'm assuming they have to have some sort of audio pipeline working by now, which SpeakXJ does confirm there is some audio support. GPU support is also in there. So yeah, this has definite potential to bring a lot more professional functionality into Chrome OS via Linux. So,
yeah,
cheers to that.
And the bigger change is the addition of cloud storage Android apps in the Files app. So now, if you're one of those people who likes to mix and match your ecosystems, and for some reason you don't use Dropbox, you can get OneDrive or Box.com or even your Synology to show up in the Files app, which is cool. But you have to do it via the Android app. It uses the intent that Android uses, or the API that Android uses to show it up in the Downloads app on Android. So that's why it doesn't work with Dropbox.
Yeah, which I also find really interesting that they're relying on Android support for a Chrome OS feature.
It is curious.
It's feeling very much like they've acknowledged they absolutely need Android support to make Chrome OS successful.
Really, this is the second time they've done it. I don't know if you remember when assistant support launched on Android via the Pixelbook, but that was just the Android app.
It was the Google app, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not the first time they've done this. It's been their go-to solution for if they need to shoehorn something in from one platform to the other, and it worked well enough. The assistant worked well enough. I mean, now it's native, but the assistant worked well enough via the app. It was frame rate was a little weird. Originally, I remember it stuttered when it launched, and then it was fine. But that worked, and this works. The only issue I ran into using cloud storage apps via the Android app and the Files app in Chrome OS was that it takes a while for the list to populate. So the first time you restart, actually I think on every subsequent restart, they don't actually show up in the Files app until the Android system's up and running and has been for a little while. So if you launch the Files app too quickly, they're not there for a minute or two. And that was the only problem I noticed.
It sounds to me like that's it's acceptable if you understand that's going to happen.
Yeah. And it's not that long of a delay. And how often do you restart a Chromebook, realistically speaking? I think most people don't. They'll probably never even notice that this is occurring, but it does happen.
I never actually thought about that. Like, it's such a small thing to think about. Like, I'm a Mac user most of the time. I also have a Windows machine, and I restart my Mac like once every week or two, maybe, if even that.
When updates come in, basically.
They're not even that common. And then the Windows machine, well, I leave it shut down most of the time, but yeah, I would have to restart that more often. But yeah, I never really thought about how often Chromebooks had to be restarted. Anyway, so Google's also working on, switch subjects a little bit, for phones. They're working on palm rejection when the always on display mode is active. So, for example, like when you pull your phone out of your pocket and raise it up to look at it, you get the dark screen. That's the always on display mode. Palm rejection will basically prevent it from accidentally switching out of that mode into the full lock screen,
which could blind you.
Yeah, at night that's kind of a major issue. You pick up the phone because of whatever reason, look at it, and next thing you know, you're staring at your bright white wallpaper.
And thank SBA Singer, Spasinger for subscribing with Twitch Prime.
Yes, thank you for spending your Twitch Primies here.
But yeah, I mean this is a fairly minor feature in and of itself, but I think it's definitely the sort of thing that a lot of people are going to get really excited about. I was always bothered on, seems like a slight segue, but on OnePlus phones, the fingerprint sensor on the 6T would blind the shit out of you at night, because when you pressed it, it would ramp the display up to maximum brightness so that it could illuminate the section that was under your finger, because it used the display's light, not some other source of illumination, to light up your thumb or whatever finger you used. And the issue is that there was the lock screen ambient display sort of widget above that with the time in red and white, and that would ramp up as well to max brightness instantaneously. And if you weren't kind of prepared for it, you were in the wrong position, the widget could be pretty blinding. And I'm glad that they fixed that on the 7 Pro, and I'm glad that Google is considering your retinas at night here, because I really find it jarring when I'm getting ready to go to bed and I need to check one last notification or check and see that an email got sent or see what my schedule's like for the morning, and something happens to blind me. I can't stand it. It really bothers me.
Oh yeah, no, I'm so with you on that. And for me, like at night, I already use dark wallpapers and stuff like that, so I'm not as worried about it in my usage. But where I worry more about accidentally activating it is if I'm just like out with friends or something like that. A lot of times, so I use Wear, so I don't actually pull my phone out of my pocket that often. But when I do, like, I, sometimes your hands are fumbling with it. You might be holding multiple things, whatever. You could be pulling out your phone as you're going through doors, whatever the circumstances. Uh, you don't always have the greatest grip on the phone, and I can't count how many times like I've just accidentally activated like the double tap response on the screen when I'm just when I'm holding it with like a thumb and a finger.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's little stuff like this, but I like that they're working on it. And to be specific, they've already committed this is coming in a future update. This isn't something they're just playing with and it may or may not happen. They've said outright this is coming. So which I mean is kind of nice given how often we get it might happen. It could happen someday. And then anywhere from a week to 2 years later, we may or may not find out it's happening or not. Anyway, so other things that are happening or not, unfortunately, they are happening. The FCC has given permission to Verizon to begin locking phones on its network for a span of 60 days.
Yeah.
Now, after that, they have to automatically unlock the phone. But this is kind of that weird middle ground between previously being required to have unlocked phones and, what they did before that, which was just lock them, keep them locked. You never unlock them unless you fight, beg, plead, pay, whatever. Yeah, Verizon was terrible about that in the past. Now it feels like they're kind of inching their way back in.
Yeah. I mean, we'll if expanded, how it gets expanded. For anyone who doesn't know the context, in 2008, for about the last decade, Verizon has been required to sell their phones in a fully unlocked state, I believe, right? Because of the open platform rule that Google imposed, because Google bid up the sale of some 600 or 700 megahertz block spectrum back in 2008. And Google really wanted that spectrum. At the time, there was all sorts of conjecture. Was this before Android Police existed? This was before Android Police existed.
Yes, I think.
Yeah. So there was a bunch of conjecture at the time that Google was interested in becoming a carrier, which was mind-boggling at the time because MVNOs were a pretty new thing, right? I didn't think we had too many of them, or at least they were rising in popularity.
People did not know what they were at the time.
Yeah.
At that time, I remember the conversations, especially T-Mobile and Sprint really operated this way. It was super popular just to say, such and such uses that network.
Yeah, exactly.
Like no one really understood what an MVNO was.
And there weren't as many multi-platform MVNOs. Now you've got ones that use 3 or 4 carriers and whatever. You're on whatever. But back then they were much more closely tied with an individual carrier. So the idea that Google would start a new carrier when we hadn't had new carriers in such a long time was this mind-boggling idea. And of course Google lost. If I remember, Google put in 2 bids, and they were both for mathematic theorem numbers, which was weird. Like geeky numbers that people who are into physics would recognize as physical constants and stuff like that were the 2 bids they put in. It was very early Google weird stuff. And so Google did eventually lose. But as part of that process, Google was able to convince the FCC at the time that if the bid got above a certain number, that 4 rules would be imposed. Now, ultimately, the FCC only ended up enforcing 2 of them. And one of them was that whoever bought it would have to make sure that they weren't able to lock devices that could access it. And so for a decade, Verizon was prevented from locking devices. And now they've been able to secure an exemption. Now, the original argument for why they wanted to do that was because of fraud. Although there's supposed to be, I actually don't know a whole lot about it because for some reason it isn't consumer facing. There's supposed to be a mechanism whereby the carriers can report stolen devices and IMEIs associated with those stolen devices and blacklisted across all of the North American carriers, so that if a device is stolen or purchased through fraud, the IMEI can be blacklisted, and even if the device is resold, it will be incapable of being used. Now, regardless of whether that system exists or worked or not, Verizon argued that the fraud that it was experiencing as a result of having to sell unlocked phones was of such a great magnitude that it was interfering with its ability to do business and that it was interfering with customer experience. I don't really know about the last argument, but fraud is a genuine issue. Whether you believe that the magnitude of the fraud that was occurring was enough for the FCC to scale back these regulations or not, the FCC has decided that it will. And the only curious thing to note about this ruling is that the FCC didn't actually agree with Verizon's request. Verizon claimed that it had the authority to do this on its own as a result of the original order. And the FCC said, no, absolutely not. The original order would have restricted this, but we will grant your request anyway. And so now for 60 days, well, soon for 60 days, we don't know when, but soon for 60 days, phones that are sold by Verizon will be locked to Verizon. And after that period, they will be automatically unlocked without you even having to request it to happen. For now, we'll see if that ends up changing further in the future.
Yeah, I have a really strong feeling that they're going to drop that aspect of it at some point. But, you know, at the very least, if it stays like this, that's really not the worst thing. And I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't know that this is true, but I have a feeling that anyone that contacts them with a good, legitimate reason for why the phone needs to be unlocked before that 60-day period, like if you're going to travel to another country or something like that, I would honestly expect Verizon's probably going to be like, okay, we get it. We'll make exceptions.
Maybe that could be the case.
I mean, they haven't said anything about that, but it's something everyone else is willing to do. And Verizon would really be shooting themselves in the foot if they screw up this little detail. But overall, I feel like this is still just kind of a thing that they're going to do to like curtail people taking advantage of special sales and things like that. They want to keep you on and force you into the contract at least long enough that you don't have a return period and you can't screw around with loopholes, basically.
Yeah.
At least that's my theory on why they actually care about this. I don't think it's about control. I don't think it's about any of the other weird things that people theorize. I think it's really just about preventing loophole abuse.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. I mean, it's also possible. Sometimes Verizon has pretty good deals. Sometimes I've noticed because I've done some of our deal roundups. Sometimes you end up with the biggest discounts on Verizon, which is weird. Well, the biggest outright discounts, not the monthly payment discounts. The biggest monthly payment discounts are always on Sprint. Nobody uses Sprint, but the biggest like outright purchase the phone discounts are usually on Verizon. And I'm thinking that they're trying to make sure that people who buy phones on Verizon, you got to at least give them some of your money for regular service. Or for all we know, the numbers for fraud could be much greater than we are able to imagine. And for some reason, they don't blacklist the IMEIs, or they're incapable of doing it, or it's not enough.
Yeah, you never know. It's so tough to predict, but yeah, either way, like I said, I feel like this isn't the most offensive thing in the world if it's actually 60 days and it's completely without without any user interaction and your phone gets unlocked. I feel like that's acceptable.
Yeah.
And like I would feel that's mostly acceptable with anyone, again, as long as you can contact them over special circumstances. Anyway, speaking of carriers, and this time we're going to the unacceptable. AT&T is probably going to get a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit that is, over some deceptive naming practices. They are sticking it started with I believe 69-cent charge, and it has increased over the last few years to currently $1.99 every month. And it is basically just a fee that they take on top of their regular service plan. It's not a government fee. It's not really anything. It's just extra money that they want to charge. Basically, the whole issue here is AT&T's advertising one price and then actually tacking on an extra $2 per month per line. So yeah, it basically whatever you think that you're supposed to be paying, you already expect to be paying extra in government fees and things like that, but you're also just paying an extra $24 a year just because. Anyway, some people in California don't like this. They've decided to sue AT&T over it. They're seeking class action status, which honestly is going to be a sure thing. There's no way they're not getting that.
I don't know
Really?
about that. So the issue with that is that there's a Supreme Court ruling in the late aughts that forced arbitration in the event of class actions. And I would bet that almost every subscriber has agreed to the terms that allows for this is standard practice now. Every subscription you see, every set of terms and conditions you click through forces you to accept these terms that require arbitration. And it'll be there's a barrier that they'll have to get past, and the judge will determine if this suit, the claims merit breaking AT&T's the agreement between AT&T and the consumer that requires this forced arbitration. The courts are so consumer friendly now. There's no way to tell.
Keep in mind, this is in California.
Business friendly, yeah. So
in California, they've already said they expect it will be thrown out on the basis that those forced arbitrations are typically considered illegal in California entirely. Therefore, basically, they just don't care.
Well, they should be illegal. Supreme Court was full of shit. Just like almost every ruling that comes out of the Robert's Supreme Court now, that ignorant sack of shit.
Well, we'll be editing that. No, actually, we'll probably leave that in because it's fair. It's appropriate. No, anyway. But yeah, I think the forced arbitration thing is probably going to get tossed just because it kind of deserves to be.
I hope so.
And that being said, this is almost sure to get class action status. And the thing is, though, is probably also going to be a fight that initially starts in California. And I've got a hunch will be limited to California at first. And then they'll expand to other states as basically once they win in California, then they'll have precedent to go on and fight it out elsewhere.
Kind of. They'll pick up my father had a whole lot of group actions, class actions. They'll end up picking up plaintiffs and partners, other attorneys in other states, and it'll turn into a bunch of parallel cases that are all effectively tied together and treated as one group. But they'll still technically be separate in each district. So
right. But yeah, so it definitely, like, this is one of the things I've known about this for a few years. I've complained about it. It's shady. It is literally like false advertising, but technically doesn't fall under the false advertising clauses. Regardless, it's just dirty.
Yeah. And I need to say before we move on, thanks for the sub, Crunchy, who is I met at RLCS in LA 2 years ago, and I'm glad that you said RLCS was a blast. I didn't get to go this year. It was in New Jersey, and I was gonna go, and then I didn't go, and I should have gone.
But yes, thank you to Crunchy for the tier 1 sub. And speaking of subs, and I won't go through the whole script, but short version, please support us. Subscribe with Twitch Prime, or as Crunchy just did, a legit paid sub. Many thank yous for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's real money, not Amazon Monopoly money.
Not the Bezos bucks.
Yeah.
And anyway, speaking of the podcast, there was a time in history where this podcast used to operate on Hangouts on Air. A dark set of days those were.
That was like 4 months ago.
Was it that long? No, actually, I think it was actually almost exactly. With the fact that Hangouts has been slowly dying anyway, and we all kind of know something's going to be shutting down here or there as time goes by, Hangouts on Air was pretty much doomed to go. Let's see. I forget. Did they give a date on this yet?
And thank you for the Twitch Prime sub. Look at the monkeys.
Oh, I love that name.
It's a good one.
But yeah, Hangouts on Air is pretty much toast. It will be checking out soon enough. YouTube is, which I may be mistaken, but I think YouTube technically took over Hangouts on Air when it acquired some of the other live streaming stuff that was part of that whole project. Maybe I'm wrong. Someone else might have technically been in charge of it. Either way, it was kind of just running in like barely maintenance mode for the
And it,
last like year and a half.
yeah, and it had been handed off so many times. It started off as attached to Google Plus, and then it was on YouTube, or I can't remember. But it changed hands in terms of development teams, right? So many times that it's not a surprise that it was eventually going to die.
Yeah. And anyone who used like I think they were called extensions, maybe it was plugins, whatever. Anyone who tried using those things, you noticed at some point like they started to break just mysteriously. Nothing would really be said. They would just kind of break. They'd be broken for a day, a week, a month, and then all of a sudden they'd kind of start working again, and it was this weird back and forth. So you got to figure at some point somebody's like, you know what, we're tired of paying for development time, let's just pull the plug on this. It needs to go. So in the meantime, Google is basically telling people to use YouTube webcam, which can allow you to do live streams to YouTube, but it only allows one person at a time, or well, one person connected, so you can't do like the groups we're doing.
You daisy chain it through some other sort of relay. One person streaming their Skype session or something.
Yeah, plus they would have to actually have just multiple sessions set up with each person they're talking with. So, it's basically one person running OBS with like a dozen, well, not a dozen, but however many chats would be open browser sessions in a window. It would be a mess.
Yeah.
I mean, it's workable. It's certainly workable, but it would be messy to set up. Or our own suggestion, because we've been using it and it's not perfect, but it works fairly well. We're using a service called Jitsi, which, hey, if you're watching right now, is pretty good. I mean, we've worked through some weird kinks with it, but it actually, I think, holds up about as well as Hangouts ever did. Though it doesn't have kind of that cool like typing detection where it would mute out the sound.
Yeah. I have a loud keyboard, so that's a problem.
Yeah. But little things. And I need to switch windows back as I was moving things around. Anyway, so speaking of things that are dying, Motorola has officially declared they're not going to continue supporting the Z2 Force on Sprint, T-Mobile, or AT&T, but they will be sending Android Pie to the Verizon version of that phone. Really, really
That's messed up.
Weird decision there. I mean, it actually makes sense because they're going to do this basically just to support the 5G Moto mod for it that will only operate on Verizon. But still, this is one of those things. If you own that phone, you're probably thinking, hey, why do they get it and we don't?
Let that be a lesson to you. Don't buy a Motorola phone.
Yeah. That's pretty much just how we feel. Like this is why we wanted to talk about this tonight. Just briefly mention, like, this is pretty much what everyone was afraid Motorola would become when Lenovo bought it. Yeah. Like, everyone loved Motorola under Google. The support was great. There was a lot of good things happening there. Lenovo took it over, and some people held out hope. Unfortunately, this is just the way that Lenovo kind of treats their phones. So, yeah, that it's a shame. It reminds me of HTC kind of did this with the Desire HD, where carrier models did not get an update to, I want to say it was Ice Cream Sandwich. I could be wrong on that. I think it was Ice Cream Sandwich, but their unlocked model did, and everyone was kind of really disappointed by that. And I know that's going way back, but a little bit of salt.
Yeah.
Anyway, switching to a slightly more optimistic angle, Samsung is going to be trying something new with their foldable phones. Or, well, this is rumored right now, but Samsung might be going with something similar to the Moto Razr design, where it's like a flip phone style with a tall screen, not super wide or anything, but just taller screen, and that will be their foldable.
I could dig it.
Yeah, I mean, to look at the model, or to look at the like fan made render that was done for the Razer, it kind of actually looks good. I mean, it's sort of your like candy bar phone, maybe a what is that, like a 18 by 9, 18 by 10 sort of aspect ratio.
Yeah, 18 or 21 or 22 or something like that. One of the taller ratios.
Yeah, but it would fold down pretty short, which would make it fit into any pants pocket really well. It looks, I mean, assuming it could actually look as nice as it does in the renders, it actually looks like a pretty good phone.
And it can make a phone reasonably compact. The only issue I see is that we don't have flexible glass yet. We don't have any durable materials that are capable of flexing, and we don't have yet the means to be able to make a transition between materials. So this is going to be another plastic display unless we have a major breakthrough in display technology in the next very immediate future, which means you're going to have a folding device that's going to be rubbing two pieces of plastic right up against one another with sand and whatever else is in your pocket getting nice inside and rubbing together, and it's going to be terrible.
Yeah, folding phones are definitely in that not great situation right now.
We just a fundamental lack of material sciences right now, and there's a ton of money, I'm sure, being poured into making glass flexible or being able to do transition areas between glass and another material and then glass again, something like that. But we'll get there. It's just not right now.
Yeah, and I do like, and I will give them credit on this. At least the presumption right now is that they would have just like a 1-inch display on the outside, which obviously that would be glass. There's no reason for it not to be. And this would be just big enough for like notifications. So, you could see text messages, you could see, well, I would assume picture messages, any major notification that's designed to support it, like that's all most people really care about. When most people pull their phone out, they're not looking at the full screen for the full screen's sake. They're usually just interested in whatever notification is on. So you wouldn't have
Having
to
quicker
open
access
this up.
to that. Yeah.
At least hopefully you wouldn't have to open this up like at the beach or something like that.
Sort of like the Moto Peak feature, whatever it's called, where you pull it out and you can see the notifications and put away.
Yeah. But yeah, without actually having to flip it open, because of course that's the key spot where you're introducing all the risk of destroying the screen. Let's see. And again, I move my windows around too much suddenly.
You need more windows. That's the way you fix this problem.
That actually is.
Whoa. They're fireworks or something.
Wow, really? Did somebody forget that we're about a week away from that?
Day is today. I mean, I am in Boston. I know we get like real into the whole 4th of July thing, but this is a little early. I feel like this might just be some backyard enthusiasts.
Could be. But man,
there's a casino. They opened the casino. There's a casino like a mile and a half that way. It's probably the casino.
And really, you're hearing sound from the casino, or they're just celebrating that there is a casino?
I don't know. One, both. Now it sounds like farts.
Okay, it does not sound like that over the microphone, but hey, cool. Anyway, to close out, there was an interesting quote by Bill Gates this last week. He has said that his biggest mistake is letting Android win. It's such an interesting, bizarre interview. And if you get the chance, obviously listen to it. But he basically said that how to actually summarize this. I should have thought this one through a little better. But basically, he said he thinks that Microsoft was in such a good position to have beaten Google on a mobile OS. And I knew my phone was going to wake up on that. That's why I tried to say it wrong. Anyway, he thinks that Microsoft should have won on that fight, and they should have controlled the mobile OS space for all of this time. Basically, them and Apple. But because of mismanagement, which he is strangely like kind of implying he takes a little bit of responsibility in, even though he was already basically stepped out of Microsoft at this point. He's kind of taking some responsibility for not having like seen ahead and taken care of the mobile space more responsibly.
Especially considering, let's remember, Windows Mobile, I think it was Windows Mobile 6, Windows Mobile, I had early Pocket PC, but when it came to phones, Windows Mobile really offered the first big screen touch experience on a phone by years ahead of Apple and even further ahead of Android, who was literally last to the scene. So I kind of agree with Bill. They had such a head start, and they just kept messing it up. They kept using these garbage low resolution displays for way too long. They were TN. They were all resistive. I don't think there was a single glass displayed Windows mobile device until after the iPhone. And the iPhone with its big capacitive glass display blew everyone's minds, you might remember. But that wasn't really that big of a deal. We'd seen capacitive glass touch interfaces in less smart devices, flush surfaces with embedded capacitive buttons. And it was just no one had taken the leap to put a capacitive digitizer on a screen because everybody assumed that the stylus experience was like better somehow.
Yeah. Really quick, I will throw in, actually, I believe last to the market was BlackBerry.
Because I mean, do they count?
They tried. They tried to be counted.
Yeah.
They came up zero. But yeah,
they had everything in place to take over. They really did. And he's right. It was a failure on their part. They had the software early. They had an earlier iteration of the hardware that they could have built upon and become the iPhone before the iPhone. The issue was that little development I ever did, and I'm not a programmer, as you know all too well, Cody. I'm nothing. But I did play a little bit with the apps for the early Pocket PCs because they were like ridiculously easy to put together. And the platform was super restrictive. There was like nothing you could do. It was kindergarten. It was for me. It was for people like me who don't really know anything. So like you couldn't mess anything up, but at the same time you couldn't really do anything. So they didn't provide developers with the tools to be able to make a successful platform. They didn't handle app distribution at all. And in fact, almost every device, the warranty was immediately voided if you ever installed a third-party application on a Pocket PC. I know all too well because I had a couple that were refused service because I had installed an app. And so between that, the fact that they didn't make it a developer-friendly environment, and the fact that they refused to iterate upon the software or the hardware before Apple came to the scene, they really just like repeatedly shot themselves in the foot with this advantage for years and years and years.
So I was a very active Windows Mobile user for a while, and for stars, I will say I think their big weak point, the thing that prevented Windows Mobile from ever actually standing a chance in the long run, is it was dog slow. It was so stupidly slow. It was painful. The dropped frames. Oh man, there were times like I have one of the faster phones still actually powered on in my bedroom. Actually, by now, after power outage, I bet it probably turned itself off. But regardless, that thing, you could try scrolling in some of the screens, and like you would just you set your finger down, move, and then you had a noticeable wait before it would catch up. And even when it caught up, like even once you got it scrolling as fast as you could, there was you measured your leg in like half seconds.
Yeah,
it was unpleasant.
And there was a one of the comments here in chat reminds me there was also an issue with hardware platform. I remember during the Windows Mobile 5 days, like the Toshiba E755 and the Axum X51V.
I believe that was just after they renamed it from Pocket PC.
You're right. So it was just after they named things from Pocket PC. There was still this uncertainty regarding hardware support. The basic platform was for both ARM and MIPS, and MIPS apps couldn't run on ARM, and ARM apps couldn't run on MIPS. So there were two parallel platforms that
It
were
was
being
actually
developed simultaneously. There was, oh God, there was another. You're right.
Yeah.
What was the other one?
I want to say x86, but
It might have been the early Atoms. There would have been the early Atoms. But either way, so like even developers, again going back to the developer problem, couldn't target platforms easily. So yeah, it was scatterbrained and ununified in the sort of way that only either a Microsoft project or a contemporary Google project could be.
But speaking of Microsoft projects, and I think this is another, well, not I think, I'm certain this was another thing they did wrong. There was something that came in between, the Microsoft kin. I'm waiting for that look of recognition. Is it? Do you not know this one?
I vaguely remember it, but that was such a flash in the pan. Like,
oh yeah, they canceled the project something like a month or two after releasing the phone.
Yeah,
like it was such a failure. They spent months hyping this up. They had tons and tons of people really into it. They actually sold a
that was the Danger hip top, right? That was renamed the kin. No, what am I thinking of?
Maybe, I don't know, but yeah. Anyway, the kin was. They managed to put it out there. They sold some, and then almost immediately.
No, I'm confusing. Yeah, and I'm confusing things. The hip top was the sidekick. That was a different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same era.
But yeah, so the kin was a massive failure, and then of course they finally shipped Windows Mobile 7 Windows Phone 7, and it was it was nice looking. It had a neat interface. At the time they called it Metro, and then later had to change the name. But
I remember that.
Yeah, it was a neat idea. They had something going there. And then they updated to Windows Phone 7.5, 7.5, and then shortly after that, that was when they shipped the first Nokia phone running Windows Phone.
Oh, I wasn't crazy. There was a connection. The kin was developed by Microsoft bought Danger, which was Andy Rubin's.
Yeah.
Company, right? Yeah. So it was a development upon the Danger. Yeah. That's where
Okay.
I was getting that from. I knew I wasn't pulling that out of my ass.
Okay. So cool. But yeah, so then I feel like Microsoft shot themselves in the foot again, because after Windows Phone 7.5, a whole bunch of people bought phones with that, especially the Nokia phone that came out with that was the first phone that had Carl Zeiss glass for the camera, and like that, so much hype. And
that the resolution on the sensor was crazy, right?
At the time, yeah.
Yeah.
At the time. It still actually wasn't that good of a camera. I had that phone. It was okay. But then they announced like 2 months later that Windows Phone 7.5 devices were not going to get an upgrade to Windows Phone 8, which was going to be coming like 9 months later.
I remember that. They had already lost at this point, though. After, in my opinion, post 2009, like the game was over. If you didn't have a mobile operating system in existence by then, if you weren't already competing, if you didn't have an app store, you had already lost. So Microsoft was building this platform that was never going to succeed, no matter how well they executed it, or how well they integrated it, how much they pushed it, how many discounts they pushed, how good the hardware was. It didn't matter. They had already lost.
I feel like, I mean, I agree with that, but at the same time, I look at all the catastrophically terrible user experience issues people are having with Android, and I think the user experience on Windows phones is so much better at that time. Like, they were competing with Gingerbread.
But I mean, even then, like, they were competing with better hardware. That was the thing. The hardware that you were getting was still better, and the software was a huge compromise. I must confess, I hate pre-ICS Android. I think that it's actually
bad.
Like a terrible experience. And having reused it at the end of last year on all of those devices for the better part of a month, I have nothing but reiterated that it is so unpleasant. Everything pre Android 4 is like borderline unusable.
No, I couldn't agree more.
Basic stuff,
I
copying and pasting text, man. Selecting text, doing anything is just a nightmare. And unending frustration.
Oh yeah. No, it was all really bad. But the thing is, I don't know. I will hold to the theory that if Microsoft had not wasted any time with a kin and had not abandoned people completely on Windows Phone 7, I think they would have stood a chance,
To
like a
maintain their
real
last
chance.
place position, perhaps.
No, I think basically they needed to just not screw up and wait for Google to screw up, which Google did still screw up a good number of times. It's not like things were perfect on Android for a really long time to come. So they could have basically just waited and probably won just by having been there. But they kept taking themselves out of the race.
Maybe.
But yeah, I don't know. To me, that was one of those. Microsoft could have won that fight. They just did everything in their power not to. Plus, they were never ever going to win over the crowd that was kind of picking up the open source everything mentality. Which
better, the Android is free to OEMs, and you can modify it however you see fit and offer your own custom experience and totally ruin it in the process. Like, we criticized that for so long, that's not as big of a problem as it now as it used to be, but that was a big driving force behind adoption. Everyone got to have their own custom operating system. They didn't have to worry about developer support. They didn't have to worry about how people made apps for it. They didn't have to worry about maintaining an app store. They just got to make this their own version of the way they want a phone to be and customize every aspect of it and let Google handle the rest for free. Well, mostly for free. There was GMS licensing, but the operating system was free.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you on that, which just suddenly reminded me, and I'm trying to find the name of it really quick, and I don't know that I will. But remember when Windows Phone got jailbroken? That was such a huge deal because people figured out ways to do a lot of modding in a very short period of time.
What do you mean by Windows Phone got jailbroken? You're talking when people went like with the HD2 and they started ROMing it? And...
No. This was somebody had developed a jailbreak for Windows. I think it was Windows Phone 7. And it like you could outright just open it up and change tons and tons. Chevron. That wait, that was the name of the team.
That sounds vaguely familiar. That was like I think it was working. That was that 2009, 2008? No, it was later than that. It was like 2011, 2012. Right?
Like 2011.
I vaguely remember that because I was working at a used electronics store in here in Boston that did a lot of phone mods, especially unlocking early iPhones. And I remember one of the guys there was really into Windows Mobile, and he was very big into Chevron. So that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it was one of those things. Like you saw all very much overnight. You saw like that the Android like modding communities just descend on Windows Phone, and so many neat things happen just instantly. Which of course Microsoft was like, no, we don't like that. Please stop. Which, you know, nothing will kill a mod scene faster than the company making this stuff be like, no, seriously, stop. We're not going to let you keep doing this. I'm not sure, but I swear I remember they tried suing them or something, which was ridiculous. But yeah,
that was back when everyone was doing that. That was the GeoHot era, all of that craziness.
Yep. So yeah, Microsoft really did everything to defeat themselves.
Basically, they started with an advantage, and
yep, everything possibly wrong was done to ruin their phone chances. But anyway, I don't know. You got any more to say on that?
No,
I didn't think so. So with that, we're going to call it a night. If you enjoyed listening to the show, we would appreciate it if you'd come support us with a Twitch sub. You can use Twitch Prime. You could use a paid sub. Either way works. If you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, you can actually use a free sub with your Twitch account. Just go on to twitch.tv/AndroidPolice and you can subscribe there. You do have to re-up that each month, and you will get with that free free entries in our site giveaways, and of course access to the infamous Ryan emoji. Which right now I feel like we should be screenshotting Ryan as the look of shock.
Can you hear this?
Oh, I totally can. Yeah, that's insane. Whatever is going on outside of your place.
Got to be like real close because it's real loud.
Yeah,
right
no.
there.
Because I know you've got your mic set up right, so it's
I turned it. It's pointed this way. It's directional. I don't know why it's picking up like 90 degrees that way.
Oh, I'm thinking all that sounds just echoing around in your apartment. But that's insane.
It's real loud. I'm gonna go out and check it out in a bit.
Oh, well, you should be a part of it. Who are you, Keith? Yeah, get into it. Anyway, and with that, we'll be closing out. Come back and join us next week on Thursday night for another episode of the podcast. Or if you're going to be around on Tuesdays and want to hear our fun voices chatting and saying weird things, Tuesday at 1:30 Pacific or 4:30 Eastern time, we're on pretty much twice a week, pretty consistently now. And with that, good night, everybody.